All right, so we got some pretty big news here coming out of the entertainment industry and also sort of bolstering this resurgence of American unions that we have seen over the last number of years as SAG-AFTRA has officially voted unanimously to recommend to the board a strike of the producers of SAG-AFTRA, which is TV, theatrical, streaming contracts, which just expired a couple of days ago. So this is pretty big, obviously, for a number of different reasons. This is a union that essentially represents a lot of the actors within Hollywood. Of course, we also have the Writers Guild that is going on strike at the same time as them. So this is effectively like shutting down the entirety of the, a huge portion of the entertainment industry. So, if you have some shows that you're watching right now, if you have some other things you were looking forward to, this could potentially throw a massive wrench in that. And it doesn't seem like there is any sort of like resolution that is immediately on the table in the foreseeable future. But it's a good thing, obviously, because this is what the power of a union can get you, the ability to collectively negotiate for better pay, better benefits, better working conditions, in this case, better protections against things like artificial intelligence, as that is continuing to encroach on the industry. And also another big thing that we're going to get to here in a second is how, because of the sort of like explosion of streaming services, that a lot of actors and writers have been getting completely screwed over by that process as well. So let's just go ahead and get into some of the details here in terms of what this is going to do and what they are actually fighting for. So here from the Washington Post, they say Hollywood actors announce strike after SAG-AFTRA negotiations fail. So they say a historic double strike that will effectively shut down Hollywood was officially called and will begin this Friday after a union representing nearly all TV and film actors failed to secure a new contract with major studios. They say the National Board for the Screen Actors Guild American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, which is what that stands for, officially announced the strike at 3 p.m. on a news conference on Thursday after meeting and voting in favor of labor action in the hours after the Wednesday deadline expired for a new agreement. They say television and radio journalists who are also SAG-AFTRA members will not be included within this strike. They say they will join an ongoing walkout by Hollywood writers, the WGA, for the first time in 63 years. Okay, so this hasn't happened in like over half a decade or half a century ago. Okay, so I mean, this is obviously going to have a major impact. They say the guild members, like the writers, they will join out on the picket lines, demand higher pay, arguing that it has become increasingly difficult to make a living in the streaming era for a variety of reasons. Streaming shows generally have shorter seasons, which often leads to less pay. And honestly, in addition to that, in the sort of like era of streaming, you have this phenomenon where, because they're trying to save on costs, because they only want to have like a certain limited amount of shows that are doing phenomenally well, you'll have shows that sort of like launch and then they only get like a season or 2 seasons to prove themselves. And if people aren't like rushing to those shows, then they just get cut and everybody gets screwed, right? And so basically the result of that is that you're not going to have the same amount of these long running shows that have seasons and seasons, 10 seasons, 12 seasons, etc., because they're just not going to get a chance to sort of get off the ground, build a fan base, build people who are sort of interested in the show. I mean, a good example of this would be a show like Breaking Bad, where a lot of people weren't really interested in it for the first couple of seasons, and then it was later on that people became more and more obsessed with it, and then people are even watching back the show years after it was off the it was finished production and all of that stuff. So I mean, this is just kind of like eliminating, number one, obviously the opportunities for the people who are within these unions, but it's also like diminishing just entertainment broadly in the US. But they continue, they say, meanwhile, they usually come with meager or non-existent residuals, the financial compensation paid to entertainers based on how much their work is viewed, which is basically similar to like syndication on TV and reruns and DVD sales. And they say, while the studios are posting immense profits with bullish outlook, as demonstrated by lavish corporate executive compensation, according to their website. Okay, so I mean, you have two different things here. Number one, again, how they're sort of like eviscerating the entertainment industry as this, streaming has become much more of an emerging and dominant position within the entertainment space. I mean, you have consequences like this, like the residuals, for example. And again, that doesn't just have consequences for these actual writers and for these actual actors who aren't getting paid, but you also have the example of, like, I think it was HBO Max that basically stripped a lot of pretty popular shows from their streaming service, only specifically because they did not want to have to pay the residuals from running those shows. And so now you have a bunch of people who liked watching that, and maybe that was part of the reason why they paid for that streaming subscription in the first place, was to watch some of those shows, and they just get completely cut because these greedy corporate executives who are making millions and millions and millions of dollars off of the backs of the writers, off of the backs of the actors and all of the other, people who are on the production staff. They're getting filthy rich off of this, and they just don't want to shell out in order to actually produce a better product. I mean, they want to strip this down as much as they possibly can, screw over their workers as much as they possibly can, and basically come out the other side. But they continue with another quote here. They say the studios and streamers have implemented massive unilateral changes in our industry's business model, while at the same time insisting on keeping our contracts frozen in amber, said the SAG-AFTRA National Executive Director. He says their refusal to meaningfully engage with our key proposals and the fundamental disrespect shown to our members is what has brought us to this point. The studios and streamers have underestimated our members' resolve. They say the fallout from the strike would extend beyond actors merely walking off set. Members of the Actors Union would also not be able to promote their work, as many have made clear. They say before Thursday's announcement, Emily Blunt, who stars in the upcoming film Oppenheimer, which is like one of the most hyped up films of this entire year, right, said in a Deadline Hollywood video, a strike would cause the cast to walk out of Thursday's London premiere, and we actually have the result of that. They did in fact walk out, so good for them. These are high profile, obviously very wealthy actors. It's not as if like they're going to go broke in the immediate future, but they are obviously engaging in some act of solidarity here by walking off this set, and obviously you'd love to see it. Now, another thing that I just wanted to point out here in terms of how ridiculous some portions of the contracts that were offered to SAG-AFTRA during these negotiations, here's one as pointed out here by Discussing Film. They say the studio's AI proposal, which is one of the core main sticking points, right? AI is getting much more advanced. There's potential for actors to get screwed over by that because these studios could try to like absorb their name and likeness and sort of like use their image to recreate them in other contexts and avoid actually having to pay them for being on screen and doing the work. And so they say part of their proposal to the union included scanning a background actor's likeness for 1 day's worth of pay and then using their likeness forever in any form without any pay or consent. Okay? I mean, this is just completely fucking ridiculous, right? And we got another quote here. So they say AMPTPs, which is basically the entity that represents all of these major studios and streamers, right? They say their responses to the union's most important proposals have been insulting and disrespectful, obviously, of our massive contributions to this industry. They say the companies have refused to meaningfully engage on some topics and on others completely stonewalled us. Until they do negotiate in good faith, we cannot reach a deal. Okay, so I mean, again, this is something we see across, multiple different industries, whether it's like the Amazon union, whether it's the Starbucks unions. We still to this day, even though many of these Starbucks unions actually voted in favor of forming their unions months and months and months, if not at this point like over a year ago, and a majority of those Starbucks unions still do not have contracts. In fact, I'm pretty sure they don't have a single contract that has been formed with Starbucks corporate. Why? Because the Starbucks company is not engaging in good faith. Okay, they're not engaging in good faith bargaining. And there was actually a recent ruling that just came down from the National Labor Relations Board specific to Amazon, where they basically ruled that Amazon is not engaging in good faith negotiations. And that's part of the tactic. They want to stall. They want to sort of bleed these workers out. They want them to quit. They want this to sort of lose its energy. And so those are the tactics that they use. And it's illegal. I mean, it straight up is illegal, which is why we have, thankfully somewhat, a decent NLRB under the Biden administration that is being proactive in terms of forcing these companies to actually engage in good faith negotiations. Hopefully the same happens here. But we'll finish off here. They say a strike is certainly not the outcome. This is from the corporate side of this equation, right? We hoped for, as studios cannot operate without the performers that bring our TV shows and films to life. And this is their spokesperson. They say the union has regrettably chosen a path that will lead to financial hardship for countless thousands of people who depend on the industry. I mean, think about that. This is, the AMPTP spokesperson, right? The person who is representing the corporate side of this equation, representing the studios, the streamers, and all that. And they are blaming the union, okay, for, so-called like causing financial hardship to the hundreds of thousands of people who work and depend on this industry. And it's like, no, that's you. You guys are the ones who are not negotiating in good faith. You guys are the ones who are continuing to try to make millions and millions of dollars exploiting the labor of these writers and of these actors that are within these unions. That's you guys who are causing this. And this is the same sort of like, opposite or reversed blame that happens anytime we talk about a union, right? It's the first question even all of the mainstream media outlets ask when they have some sort of a union representative on. They say, oh, you're going to cause so much economic harm by your actions, right? Think about the people who are struggling to get to work because, over in London, the, rail workers are going on strike or whatever the case may be. That's always the strategy. It is always to try to divide and conquer among the working class. I mean, that is their strategy at the end of the day, and it looks like they're doing exactly the same thing in this circumstance. But of course, it is on the corporate side of this where the blame should lie. 100%. It's not as if they're strapped for cash. It's not as if they can't, respect the boundaries that these actors and that these writers are trying to set up. No, they're just greedy motherfuckers. They're just capitalists. They are trying to, extract maximal profits as they possibly can out of this industry, regardless of how much it damages, the product that they are putting out there, and regardless of how much it damages the lives of the actual people who are within this union. And so just to back that up here, switching over to the WGA, which again is still out on strike right now, we had a pretty revealing series of comments here by some studio executives and streaming executives in terms of what exactly their strategy is, which is pretty much exactly what I just said, bleeding these workers dry until they are forced to come back to the table and accept an offer that they otherwise wouldn't accept. So they say here from Deadline, Hollywood Studios' WGA strike endgame is to let writers go broke before resuming talks in the fall. They say regardless of whether SAG-AFTRA goes on strike this week, obviously they did, the studios have no intention of sitting down with the Writers Guild for several more months. They say, I think we're in for a long strike and they're going to let it bleed out, said one industry veteran intimate with the POV of the studio CEOs. They say, receiving positive feedback from Wall Street since the WGA went on strike on May 2nd, Warner Bros. Discovery, Apple, Netflix, Amazon, Disney, Paramount, and others have become determined to break the WGA, as one studio executive blatantly put it. To do so, the studios and the AMPTP believe that by October, most writers will be running out of money after 5 months on the picket lines and no work. The end game is to allow things to drag on until union members start losing their apartments and losing their houses, a studio executive told Deadline. Acknowledging the cold as ice approach, several other sources reiterated the statement. One insider called it a cruel but necessary evil. A cruel but necessary evil. The studios and streamers, next to the financially strapped writers, would go to the WGA leadership and demand that they restart talks before what could be a very cold Christmas. All right, so obviously incredibly dark stuff here, okay? Also, not surprising stuff here. This is what all of these, corporations, these capitalist ghouls do when it comes to their workers going on strike. They want to bleed them out. They want to punish them. And this is the power that they have under a capitalist economic model, right? They have the power to extract ungodly amounts of money off of your backs, off of your labor value that you are putting in, that the writers are putting in, that the actors are putting in, that everybody on the production staff is putting in to make these executives filthy rich, so they get to profit off of your labor. And then when you decide to try to moderately push back and ask for like basic living standards, so you can have a living wage, so you can have basic benefits, so that you can have a decent working conditions, so that they're not, using AI to profit off of your labor without even paying you a single fucking cent, right? And so they have the power to, when you try to push back against those things, right, or to achieve those things for yourself and for your fellow workers, now they have the ability to turn around and basically try to bleed you dry, to try to have your life destroyed, to have you literally thrown out onto the street, okay? That is the power that they wield over us under a capitalist system, right? So, I mean, it shows you just a fundamental, a dysfunction, a fundamental reality of how broken this kind of an economic model is. And they're saying this, I mean, again, a cruel but necessary evil. Why is it necessary? The only way it's necessary is if you believe, it's worth it to put people out literally onto the streets, right? Throw people out of their homes, out of their apartments, in order for what? Your shareholders, your executives, your board of director, your CEO to make a couple million more bucks that year? I mean, that's what they're saying is a cruel but necessary evil. I mean, it's really saying the quiet part out loud, right? And so they obviously put out a statement here and they said, these anonymous people are not speaking on our behalf or our member companies, and this is from the AMPTP. So, I mean, listen, they're going to try to downplay it. They're going to try to say, no, we would never say that. But the reality of the situation is, whoever said that, whatever, anonymous studio executive told Deadline that, they were just the ones who were saying it out loud. Because this is, again, the same exact mindset that every single corporation has when their workers are unionizing, when their workers are going out on strike. They don't want to give an inch because they know that that leads to workers feeling more empowered, as they should, and feeling as if they actually deserve deserve more respect within their workplace, and that they can collectively organize to get a better, living situation for themselves and their fellow workers. So that's the lesson at the end of the day. Obviously, solidarity with these writers, solidarity with these actors. I hope that they get every single goddamn demand that they are asking for from these studios, from these streamers, and we'll have to see where it goes from here.
Everyone is saying GoodPoliticGuy has the best politic. Believe me, no one does it like him. Believe me, everyone is saying